The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Its rhythm echoed through the dimly lit room. Alice sat cross-legged on her bed, the old book open before her. The cover read Alice in Wonderland in faded gold letters. She smiled faintly, running her fingers across the worn pages. Outside, the wind brushed against the window pane. A branch scraped softly against the glass. The sound made her glance up, heart skipping a beat. She took a deep breath and began to read. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. Each word seemed to float in the still air. As she read about the rabbit with the pocket watch, she felt a strange tingle crawl up her arm. The room felt colder. The air grew heavy, like mist pressing against her skin. She turned the page slowly. The illustration of the rabbit seemed sharper than before. Its eyes glimmered with something alive. Alice blinked hard. She looked around her small room. Everything appeared the same, yet not quite. The lamp flickered once, casting long shadows across the floor. Her reflection in the mirror behind the lamp was smiling, but she was not. Her throat tightened. She whispered, "That is impossible." Her reflection tilted its head, still smiling. The wind outside howled, rattling the window. She shut the book quickly, but the ticking clock grew louder. The sound no longer came from the wall. It came from beneath her bed. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Alice's heart pounded. She leaned forward, her breath shallow. The sound grew faster, frantic, as if something alive was counting down. She reached out with a trembling hand and lifted the blanket edge. The space beneath her bed was pure black. No light reached it. The ticking stopped. Silence filled the room, heavy, electric, watching her. She sat frozen, the book still in her lap. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. She could hear the faintest whisper, not from her lips, but from the pages of Alice in Wonderland itself. It called her name, once, then again. Her fingers twitched toward the cover. The letters were glowing faintly now, golden and alive. Her name shimmered across the page where none existed before. Alice! Written in her own handwriting. Her vision blurred for a moment. The smell of old paper filled her lungs, sweet, dusty, intoxicating. The room tilted slightly, as if the air itself had weight. The book trembled in her hands. And when she blinked again, the words were no longer English. They twisted and crawled across the page like living things. Her breath hitched as the ink began to drip downward, falling onto her palms like black tears. The floor beneath her seemed to ripple, as if the story was not just a story anymore. The clock struck once. Its sound was deeper than metal, like a heartbeat in the dark. Alice looked up and saw the rabbit standing by her mirror. Its eyes gleamed red beneath the flickering light. It raised one trembling paw and pointed directly at her. Alice's mouth went dry. Her voice caught in her throat, trapped between disbelief and terror. The rabbit stood perfectly still, tall, silent, its fur matted with streaks of gray and shadow. Its red eyes shimmered like twin drops of blood. The room's air grew thick, pressing against her chest until every breath became a struggle. She wanted to scream. She wanted to move, but her body refused her. The only sound was the faint rustle of pages turning by themselves. The book lay open in her lap, though she had not touched it. The words bled and rearranged into new sentences. Each line whispered softly, almost like breath against her ear. "Follow," it said. "Follow before it is too late." Alice shook her head slowly. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "No," she whispered. "This is a dream." But the floor beneath her trembled, and her bed began to sink an inch at a time, as if the wood itself were turning liquid. The mirror behind the rabbit shimmered like rippling water. Its surface pulsed with faint light, and through it she could see shapes moving. A dark forest, fog swirling between twisted trees. Somewhere in that forest, a faint ticking echoed again. The rabbit tilted its head. The gesture was strangely human, disturbingly gentle. Then it stepped backward into the mirror, disappearing completely, swallowed by the reflection. Alice's body finally responded. Her legs moved before her mind did. She dropped the book, the sound of its fall strangely muffled. Without realizing why, she stepped closer to the mirror. The glass shimmered brighter as she approached. Her reflection no longer copied her. It smiled, wide, unnatural, as if its cheeks were being pulled by invisible strings. It reached out a hand toward her, its fingers meeting the surface that looked like glass but rippled like water. Alice felt warmth radiating from it. Her heart pounded faster. Every instinct told her to run. But curiosity, that dangerous, ancient whisper, moved her hand forward until her fingertips brushed the surface. The world collapsed into sound. A low hum swallowed everything. Her skin tingled, her vision blurred. And when her eyes cleared, she stood in a forest bathed in blue light. The trees were tall, impossibly tall, their trunks smooth like glass, their leaves whispering secrets. The ground shimmered with silver dust that glowed faintly beneath her bare feet. The air smelled of rain and rust, like the world had just been washed clean after centuries of silence. Alice turned in circles, heart racing. There was no sign of the rabbit, only the faint trail of ticking that faded deeper into the woods. She began to walk, each step sinking softly into the glowing soil. The forest grew denser, the light dimmer, until every tree looked the same, tall, watching, endless. Something moved behind her, a whisper of breath. She turned quickly, but saw only trees and drifting mist. Then she heard it, a faint laughter, childlike, echoing from nowhere. Alice, the voice sang softly. It was her own voice, but it came from behind the trees. Her heart thudded painfully. She took a cautious step forward. The laughter came again, closer now, sweeter. It sounded almost friendly. Almost. The mist thickened, curling around her ankles. Shapes moved within it, fleeting shadows of people. Faces half-formed, eyes hollow. They watched her pass, their mouths open as if whispering her name without breath. Alice clutched her arms tightly around herself. Her thoughts twisted between waking and dreaming. She remembered the smell of her room, the feel of her blanket, the sound of the clock. But all of that was gone now. Here, time felt like a living thing, hungry, circling. Then she saw it again. The rabbit, standing just beyond the fog, still as a statue. Its eyes no longer red, but black and endless. In its paw, it held a pocket watch that glowed faintly blue. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The rhythm pulsed through her chest like a heartbeat. Alice stepped closer. Her voice trembled. "Where am I?" The rabbit's jaw opened slowly, and the sound that came out was not speech. It was a blend of ticking and whispering, as if time itself was answering her. She felt the words rather than hearing them. "You follow the story. Now the story follows you." The trees around her shifted suddenly, their trunks twisting as if alive. The forest tilted again, and the ground rippled beneath her feet. The silver dust rose in the air, swirling into patterns. Letters, words, sentences she almost recognized. They were from her own book, Alice in Wonderland. Every word she had read now floated around her, glowing faintly in the air, spinning faster and faster. Her hair lifted in the strange wind. The light grew brighter. She tried to step back, but the ground held her in place, roots coiling around her ankles. The rabbit raised its watch high. The ticking grew louder until it filled her head. She screamed, but no sound escaped her mouth. The forest burst into light. Every word around her ignited like a spark, and in that blinding moment, she saw faces: the Mad Hatter, the Queen of Hearts, the Cheshire Cat, but twisted, distorted, their eyes hollow like broken porcelain. They surrounded her in a silent circle. Each face smiled too wide, their teeth gleaming under the pale blue glow. The rabbit stepped forward, its shadow stretching long. Alice's knees trembled. Her body felt lighter, as if something inside her was being pulled apart. The rabbit leaned close, its voice no longer a whisper but a low, vibrating hum. "You read the story," it said. "Now the story will read you." Her vision began to fade. The trees melted into darkness, the faces into streaks of light. She felt herself falling, not through space, but through the pages of a book. Each page she passed showed her own reflection, eyes wide with fear, trapped behind ink and paper. She tried to scream again, but the only sound was the turning of pages. Then silence. Her eyes fluttered open. She was back in her room. The lamp glowed softly. The wind outside was calm. The book lay close beside her. Her hands were trembling. She laughed shakily, telling herself it had all been a dream. But when she looked down at the book, there was something new carved into the leather cover. in faint letters that shimmered in the light. It read, "Property of Alice Kingsley. Return from the other side." She stared in disbelief. Her fingertips brushed the surface, and it felt warm. Then, from inside the book, she heard a single, unmistakable sound. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Alice's heart hammered, so loudly she thought the sound might drown out the ticking. Her breathing grew shallow. Each inhale scraped her throat like sandpaper. The air in the room had turned thick again, dense with the smell of paper and smoke. She stared at the book. It no longer looked old. The gold letters gleamed freshly pressed, as if it had just been bound moments ago. She wanted to throw it away, to send it out the window, to burn it, to destroy whatever it had become. But something inside her refused. A strange pull, gentle yet commanding, drew her hand toward the cover once more. Her fingers trembled as they brushed against the words. The leather felt alive beneath her touch, warm, breathing, as if a heartbeat pulsed faintly within it. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound came again, steady and slow. Not from under the bed this time. Not from the wall. It came from inside the book. Alice pulled her hand away. The ticking stopped instantly. Her room fell silent, so silent she could hear her pulse throbbing behind her ears. The stillness itself felt wrong, like the calm before a scream. Her eyes darted toward the mirror. The reflection of the room looked unchanged. Same bed, same lamp, same trembling girl sitting in terror. But then she noticed it. Her reflection's hands were resting flat on the book. Her own were not. Alice froze. The reflection's fingers moved slowly, pressing the book open again, page by page, while she sat motionless in the real world. The pages fluttered by themselves. Wind that did not exist brushed against her face. A whisper slipped through the mirror. Low, sweet, almost like her mother's voice calling her name. Alice! She stood up unsteady. Her knees felt weak, and her head pulsed with a dizzy ache. She took one step backward, then another, but the mirror's surface rippled again, and her reflection began to rise. The version of her behind the glass looked calm, serene even, with eyes too dark to be human. It placed one hand against the inside of the glass. The faintest crack spread outward from the point of contact, a sound so sharp and small it made her flinch. Her reflection smiled. Then it pressed harder. The mirror cracked again. A jagged line crawled across the surface, splitting her face in two reflections, one terrified, one smiling. The room's temperature dropped suddenly. The lamp flickered. Every sound in the world seemed to vanish, except for her heartbeat. Alice reached for the doorknob, but her fingers froze midair. Her body stiffened, muscles refusing to move, as if invisible hands held her in place. The reflection tilted its head. Its lips moved without sound. Then the glass shattered outward. Not inward, outward, spraying fragments across the room like a burst of ice. Alice screamed and fell back. Shards rained down, cutting tiny red lines across her arms. But when she looked up, her reflection was gone. Only darkness filled the mirror frame. Thick, moving darkness, like the surface of a deep, black ocean. And from within it, a pale hand reached out. Alice scrambled backward on the floor, her breath fast and broken. The hand gripped the edge of the mirror. Its fingers were long, delicate, skin pale like candle wax. It pulled itself forward, and a face emerged. Her own, not quite her. Its eyes were deeper, its smile too wide, its movements too smooth. It stepped through the frame completely, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Alice stared at herself. Her double tilted its head, studying her like a predator examining prey. Then it spoke, and the voice was hers, but twisted, lower, smoother. "You are late," it said softly. "Time has been waiting for you." Alice backed away until her back hit the wall. "Stay away from me," she whispered. Her voice sounded tiny in the heavy air. Her reflection smiled wider. "You read my story. You called me out. Now you must take my place." Before Alice could respond, the book on her bed snapped open. Pages flew like wings, whirling in a storm of paper and ink. The words lifted from the pages, letters glowing, floating, circling both of them. The other Alice reached out a hand. Ink bled from her fingertips like smoke. When it touched the air, it turned into shapes: rabbits, cards, teacups, all twisting in slow motion. Alice could not move. Her body trembled. She felt the ground shift beneath her. The floorboards rippled again like water, pulling at her ankles. The other Alice smiled kindly now, almost tender. "It will not hurt," she whispered. "It never does. It is just a change of story." Alice screamed. The sound cracked through the room. She clawed at the walls, but her fingers slipped through the solid wood like fog. Her legs sank deeper into the floor, the world dissolving around her into silver light. She saw her double bend down and pick up the book. The other Alice brushed the cover gently, then looked at her with pity. "Thank you," she said softly. "I was tired of being the story." The last thing Alice saw before the light consumed her was her double closing the book. Then silence. The air stilled. The room was clean again. Mirror unbroken. Floor smooth. Lamp steady. The girl sitting on the bed looked calm. She smiled faintly, opened the book to the first page, and began to read aloud. Her voice was steady and warm, but if one listened closely, just beneath the words, a faint sound could be heard. A muffled cry, distant, echoing from somewhere deep inside the pages. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound merged with her voice, a quiet rhythm between every word. Outside, the night deepened. The moon hung low, pale and silent. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying with it whispers that almost sounded like laughter. In the small room, the new Alice, or whatever she had become, turned another page. Her eyes glowed faintly gold under the lamplight. She read of white rabbits, of queens, of falling through holes in the ground. Her smile never faded. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book slowly. The gold letters shimmered for a moment, then faded into the leather. She stood and placed the book on the shelf beside her bed. As she turned away, the book's cover pulsed once with faint light. From within, a whisper escaped, a voice that sounded very much like hers. "Please, let me out." The light faded, the room grew still again, and the ticking began once more. Slow, steady, eternal. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The new Alice stood motionless for a long time. Her head tilted slightly, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. The faint ticking echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once. It blended with the sound of her heartbeat, until she no longer knew which was which. The lamp flickered softly. Its light threw her shadow onto the wall, tall and still. But the shadow was wrong. Its head turned a second slower than hers. Its lips moved when hers did not. She watched it silently. Then she smiled, a calm, knowing smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Her hand lifted slowly, and the shadow's hand lifted too. But its fingers stretched longer, bending unnaturally. The air trembled. The light dimmed. The smell of smoke and old ink filled the room again. Somewhere deep inside her mind, the voice of the real Alice screamed. She heard it faintly, muffled, as though trapped behind heavy glass. The new Alice turned toward the window. Rain had started to fall outside. It slid down the glass in slow, deliberate lines. The world beyond looked blurred. Houses melted into shadows. The moon bent into a crooked shape. She walked toward the window, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. When she pressed her palm against the glass, the raindrops froze in place. Each one shimmered with faint golden light. Her reflection appeared again, smiling that same perfect, empty smile. "Almost perfect," she whispered. Her voice carried two tones, hers, and another deeper one beneath it, a voice that belonged to the story itself. Behind her, the book shifted on the shelf. It slid forward an inch, then stopped. The faint glow of its lettering returned. She turned her head slightly and spoke to it without facing it. "I know," she said quietly. "I remember the rules. There must always be an Alice." Her shadow nodded behind her. Then, slowly, it stepped away from her body. It detached itself completely, walking toward the center of the room while she stood still. The light pulsed brighter, and for a heartbeat, there were two Alices, one made of flesh, one of ink. The ink Alice turned her head with a fluid, boneless motion. Her eyes were deep hollows filled with liquid gold. She spoke with a voice that rippled the air. Time is almost finished, she murmured. Someone must turn the page. The new Alice smiled faintly, a tear glimmering in her eye that was not sadness but memory. She looked around the room, her gaze resting on the old clock on the wall. It had stopped. The hands both pointed straight down. Not to 12, not to 6, but to nowhere at all. She whispered, "Then it begins again." And the clock resumed ticking. Backward this time. The air folded inward like paper. The room twisted and bent, its edges softening until it looked like a drawing half finished by an unseen hand. The walls rippled with lines of ink, turning into pages, hundreds of them, moving gently like breathing skin. The ink Alice placed her hand on one of the walls. Words began to appear across it, lines forming themselves in curling script. They described everything as it happened, every motion, every breath, written in real time. Alice stepped closer and read aloud. She turned toward the shadow that was not hers, and whispered her name, and the story began again. Her lips quivered as she finished the line. The moment she spoke the last word, her voice echoed, not in the room, but within the walls themselves. Every page around her shuddered. Letters spilled downward like rain, dripping into the air, forming a pool of ink that spread across the floor. The ink was alive. It pulsed, it breathed, and faint whispers rose from within it. Alice crouched beside it. She could hear voices now, hundreds of them, calling, crying, pleading. Some sounded like children, some like echoes of her own laughter. They were the others, the ones who had read too deeply, the ones who had followed the story before her. Her reflection in the ink moved differently than she did. It smiled, though she did not. Its mouth formed words she could not hear, but she understood them somehow, not in her ears, but in her bones. "Join us." The air grew cold enough to sting her lungs. She stood up, shaking, and backed toward the shelf. The book was waiting. Its pages rustled as if caught in a breeze that did not exist. It opened itself again, revealing a blank page, perfectly white. Alice reached toward it slowly. Her hand trembled, but something stronger than fear guided her. The ink from the floor rose upward like smoke, curling around her wrist. It slid across her skin, writing symbols she did not understand. Each mark burned for a second, then sank beneath the surface, fusing with her veins. Her breath came in shallow bursts. The room around her blurred, folding inward until the edges vanished. She could hear the ticking again, louder, faster, racing towards some invisible conclusion. The ink whispered, "Only one way out." Alice looked down at the page. Her reflection appeared faintly in the smooth, white surface. It was the real her, the trapped one. Eyes wide, lips trembling, hands pressed against the inside. Tears streaked her face, but no sound came out. For the first time, the new Alice hesitated. Something deep within her stirred. A flicker of memory, of laughter, of fear, of the girl who had once just wanted to read a story before sleep. Her throat tightened. She whispered, "I remember you." The reflection's eyes widened. The world around them cracked like glass. The clock struck once, not a normal chime, but a heavy, hollow thud that shook the room. The ink flared into light. Every page in the room burst open. Letters flew in all directions, swarming around her like black snow. The voices screamed, some in joy, some in pain. And in that chaos, the two Alices reached for each other. Their fingertips met through the page. The light exploded. The ticking stopped. Silence. When sound returned, a faint breeze moved through the room. The lamp flickered. The book lay closed on the floor again, its cover faintly smoking. On the wall, the mirror was whole. The clock's hands pointed straight up again. Midnight, and sitting on the bed was Alice. Her breathing was slow, steady, her face calm, her eyes clear. She blinked and looked around, confused but awake. The book remained closed beside her. The gold letters had faded completely. It looked old once more, dusty and harmless. She smiled faintly, though she did not know why. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled new, washed clean. But as she turned off the lamp and lay down, something faint echoed from the shelf, a whisper softer than a sigh. "Once upon a time." And as her eyes closed, the clock began to tick again. Steady, patient, eternal. Tick, tock, tick, Talk. Alice's lips parted, but no sound escaped. The rabbit's shadow stretched long across the floor, its outline twitching as if it were made of smoke. The air thickened, pressing against her skin like invisible hands. She wanted to scream, to move, to shut her eyes and wake from whatever dream had taken her. But her body refused. Her fingers remained locked around the book. Her breath came shallow, each inhale a whisper of fear. The rabbit stepped closer, its claws clicking faintly on the wood. Its fur shimmered like silver thread under the flickering light. When it spoke, the voice did not come from its mouth, but from the space behind her eyes. "You read the words," it said softly. "Now you must follow them." Alice's pulse roared in her ears. She shook her head, trembling. "I will not go anywhere," she said, though her voice sounded small and certain. The rabbit tilted its head, its glassy eyes reflecting her face back at her, distorted, endless. "You already began," it said. "The story opened, and you opened with it." The book in her lap shifted. Pages flipped on their own, fast and violent, as if some wind moved only through that single space. She tried to hold it still, but the paper cut her palm, a thin bright line of blood trailing down her wrist. The drop hit the page. The ink absorbed it, turning the white paper a deep, pulsing red. Words began to form, lines she did not recognize, sentences she never read before. Her name appeared again, followed by another, the other Alice. Her chest tightened. The rabbit took another step forward. The ticking started again, but now it came from inside the mirror. She turned her head slowly. In the reflection, she was still sitting on the bed, but the reflection of the rabbit was behind that Alice, its paw resting on her shoulder. The mirror Alice smiled, a perfect, calm smile that did not belong to her. Alice stumbled to her feet, the book falling open on the floor. The whispering grew louder, hundreds of voices spilling from the pages. Each voice spoke her name, each one slightly off, like echoes from broken mouths. She backed toward the door, but when her fingers touched the handle, it turned warm, too warm. She jerked her hand back and saw the metal glow faintly red. The smell of iron filled the air. The door pulsed like something breathing. The rabbit's reflection moved closer to the glass. Its red eyes burned through the shimmer. Behind it, the mirrored room stretched endlessly, an infinite hallway of doors, each slightly open, each leading into darker spaces. Alice took another step back. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet. The sound echoed through the stillness, and from beneath the bed, something answered, a slow scraping, as if nails dragged along the wood. Her body froze again. Her eyes darted downward. A pale hand reached from the darkness beneath the bed, fingers long and trembling. It was her own hand. Her breath hitched. The hand mirrored every motion she made, but its skin was colder, its veins darker, its nails cracked and blackened. When she moved away, it followed, not with her, but after her, a fraction too late, as if the reflection lagged behind reality. The rabbit tilted its head toward the mirror. "You belong there," it whispered. "She has waited long enough." Alice's knees weakened. Her heartbeat thundered. The mirror began to hum, a low vibration that crawled up the walls. The glass rippled like water, and the reflection of her other self stepped closer. The mirror Alice placed her palm against the glass. Cracks spread outward from the touch, thin, silver fractures that glowed faintly. Alice shook her head violently. "No," she said. Her voice broke. "This is a dream. This is only a story." The rabbit's mouth twitched, revealing rows of sharp, glinting teeth. "All stories begin somewhere," it said, "and this one began with you." The mirror burst outward in a silent explosion. Shards of glass hung suspended in the air, frozen like drops of rain. Behind them was no wall, only darkness, deep and endless. From that darkness, the reflection stepped out. She moved exactly like Alice, but her eyes were void of color, pale and empty like moonlight on still water. She smiled, and the sound of the ticking clock filled the silence once more. The rabbit bowed its head. "The hour is late," it said softly. "Trade must be made." Alice stumbled backward, her foot catching the edge of the fallen book. She fell to her knees, hands scraping against the wooden floor. The reflection knelt down too, mirroring her movement. When Alice looked up, Their faces were only inches apart. The air between them shimmered, warm and cold all at once. Her reflection reached out. Alice tried to pull away, but invisible force pinned her in place. The fingers brushed her cheek, ice against fire. The moment their skin met, a sharp ringing filled her head. The room dissolved. The walls melted into swirling colors. The ceiling stretched into sky, and the floor opened like water beneath her. She fell through the air, the pages of Alice in Wonderland spinning around her like white birds. The rabbit's red eyes glowed somewhere above, watching, waiting. Her own reflection fell beside her, smiling still, hands reaching, ready to pull her deeper into the story that would never end. The last thing Alice saw before the darkness closed completely was her book, floating open, its pages blank, except for one line written in crimson ink. Welcome to Wonderland, where the reader never leaves. The air was thick and still. Alice's breath came in short, unsteady gasps. Her body drifted weightless through a darkness that felt alive. There was no ground beneath her, no sky above, only a soft hum that pulsed inside her skull. Every beat sounded like a whisper calling her name. She tried to move her arms, but they were heavy, as if tied by invisible threads. Something brushed past her ankle, smooth, cold, like the skin of a fish sliding through black water. She flinched, twisting in panic, but the void stretched endlessly in every direction. Then, faintly, a flicker of light appeared below her. It shimmered like a candle beneath the surface of deep water. The pull grew stronger, dragging her toward it. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the hum. She wanted to scream, but her voice vanished into silence. As she descended, the light widened into a circle. Colors emerged, red, gold, and blue, swirling like smoke. When her feet touched the ground, the floor rippled as if she stood on the skin of a lake. The air smelled of wet earth and old paper. She looked down and saw pages floating beneath her feet. Endless pages, each one whispering fragments of words she could not understand. Something about the place felt familiar. The trees that rose from the mist were tall and pale, their branches twisting like hands. Each one had letters carved into its bark. Sentences, names, even her own. Her skin prickled. She reached out to touch one, and the bark pulsed like a heartbeat beneath her fingers. A voice came from behind her. "You found the in-between," it said. Alice spun around. The rabbit stood there again, taller now, its ears brushing against the low-hanging fog. Its eyes glowed dimly, and in one paw it held a pocket watch that bled sand instead of ticking. "The story breathes," it said, "and you are inside its lungs." Alice stepped back. "I want to go home," she whispered. The rabbit's grin widened, showing rows of sharp, wet teeth. "Home is a memory," it replied. "Here, memory becomes ink." It raised the watch and turned it upside down. The bleeding sand fell upward, and the trees around them began to move. Their roots uncurled from the ground, stretching toward the sky like tendrils. From the mist, shapes began to form. Faces half-formed, eyes without pupils, mouths murmuring words that dripped like rain. Alice clutched her head, the noise filling every part of her mind. The whispers overlapped, some gentle, some furious. She caught fragments of her own voice among them, reading, laughing, crying. The book had stolen her sound. The rabbit motioned toward a path between the trees. "You will see her soon," it said. The other Alice. Her stomach tightened at the name. She wanted to run in the opposite direction, but the path was the only space that stayed still. Everywhere else, the ground writhed like a living thing. With hesitant steps, she followed the rabbit. Each step echoed softly, as if the world were hollow beneath her. The fog began to clear, revealing a garden bathed in gray light. Roses grew along the edges, their petals made of torn paper, their thorns made of quills. The scent of ink filled her lungs. At the garden's center stood a mirror, tall as a door, framed in gold that pulsed faintly. In the reflection, she saw not herself, but the other Alice, smiling, serene, holding the same book. The reflection tilted its head and spoke. "You took my place," it said. "Now I will take yours." Alice stepped back, heart hammering. The reflection reached out from the glass. The surface rippled like water, and its fingers slipped through. Cold touched her cheek. The other Alice's touch felt real. Too real. The rabbit bowed slightly, its grin never fading. The story demands balance, it said. One must read. One must remain. No, Alice whispered. I never wanted this. It was only a book. The reflection smiled wider. There are no books, it said. Only doors. With that, the mirror shattered, not into pieces, but into rivers of gold. The shards melted into the air, swirling around Alice like fireflies. Her vision blurred, and suddenly she was standing in her bedroom again. The lamp flickered. The book lay open on the bed, its pages calm and still. The clock ticked softly. Everything looked normal. But when she exhaled, the sound echoed twice. Her reflection in the mirror across the room was slow, half a second behind, and her reflection smiled before she did. Her chest tightened. She reached toward the mirror cautiously. Her fingers touched the cold glass, and for a split second, the reflection's eyes turned black. Alice stumbled backward, knocking the book to the floor. Its pages fluttered open to the middle. The words glowed, faintly red. She saw her own handwriting again. But the message was different this time. The story is not done. Her heart pounded. She reached down. But before she could touch the page, the room grew darker. The shadows along the walls began to move. They stretched, forming long, twisting arms. The whispers returned. Softer now, but clearer. They spoke in unison, the same phrase over and over. Turn the page, Alice. Turn the page. She covered her ears, shaking her head, but the sound came from inside her. Every beat of her pulse was another whisper. The air pressed down on her chest, forcing her to her knees. Her hand brushed against the book. Its pages were hot to the touch. A faint hum rose from the paper. It grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards, through her bones. And then she saw movement within the words. Tiny letters rearranging themselves. Sentences rewrote in real time, telling her what to do, what to say, how to move. She watched her own life appear on the page, line after line, each word forming before she acted it out. She reached to close it, but the book refused to shut. The pages stuck to her hands like wet skin. Her reflection laughed softly, the sound distant yet familiar. Alice, it said from the mirror, do not fight it. You are the story now. Her voice broke into a sob. The book pulled at her hands, dragging her forward. Her reflection mirrored every motion. Stepping closer to the glass, the room tilted. The clock stopped ticking. Then, without warning, the world bent in on itself, walls folding like paper, light twisting into dark. The mirror cracked again, but this time the cracks spread outward, beyond the room, beyond her mind. Alice's last clear thought was that she could taste ink on her tongue, bitter and metallic. Then the book closed on its own, the cover sealing with a faint sigh. The clock began to tick again, and from inside the mirror, two faces stared out, one smiling, one silent, both waiting for the next reader to open the page. The mirror was still, completely still. Not a tremor in the glass, not a flicker of light, not a trace of the girl who had stood there moments ago. Only silence, only the faint rhythm of the ticking clock. Each second stretched longer than it should have, as though time itself had grown uncertain. Then, slowly, the reflection began to breathe. A soft fog spread across the inside of the glass, like frost forming on winter mornings. From within the mist, a faint outline of a girl appeared again, hair hanging loose, eyes wide and dark as ink. It was Alice, but not the Alice who had lived outside the mirror. This one moved differently. Her smile was slower, colder, as if carved into her face rather than chosen. She tilted her head slightly, watching the empty room beyond the glass. Her gaze fell upon the book lying open on the floor. The cover twitched. The pages began to flutter one by one, though no wind moved in the room. Inside the mirror, the other Alice raised her hand and touched the surface. A faint ripple spread outward. The book responded, its words glowing once more, their light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Then a whisper, soft but clear, a voice that came from the walls themselves. Every story needs a reader. Every reader leaves a mark. The other Alice smiled. Her reflection deepened, and from the dark corners of the glass, Shadows began to crawl toward her feet. Shadows shaped like hands, like memories, like faces half forgotten. Each shadow whispered something different. Fragments of laughter, of cries, of gasps taken in fear. The stories of every reader who had opened the book before her. Their voices looped together, forming a song of quiet despair. The room around the mirror began to twist. The furniture bent at strange angles. The ceiling rippled like liquid. The clock on the wall melted, its hands dripping like wax, each drop hissing softly as it fell onto the floorboards. And beneath the growing distortion, the book began to open wider, wider than a book should open, until its pages formed a dark spiral, spinning in the center of the room. The other Alice stepped closer to the glass. Her reflection reached back, as if preparing to step through again. But this time, the mirror resisted. It trembled, refusing to let her pass. She frowned, pressing her palms flat against the surface. "Let me out," she whispered. Her voice echoed in layers, 1,000 versions of her tone overlapping. The glass cracked under her hands. A long fracture cut across her reflection, dividing her face into two distorted halves. One side smiled, the other screamed. Outside the mirror, the pages of the book swirled faster. Ink lifted from the paper, forming tiny black ribbons that twisted in the air. They gathered near the center of the spiral, coalescing into a shape, a figure made of words, alive and shifting, as if the story itself was trying to take form. The figure turned its head, eyes made of letters blinked once. It looked toward the mirror, and began to walk. With every step, the floor creaked inside, its wood splitting into cracks that bled with shadows. The other Alice's eyes widened. She pounded the inside of the mirror, her palms striking the glass again and again. "Stop it!" she cried. "You do not belong here." But the word figure only smiled. Its body flickered, its mouth forming words that were not spoken, only written in the air. The story continues. It reached the mirror, placed one inky hand upon the surface, and began to press. The glass did not shatter this time. It melted, like ice under flame. It dripped and warped, allowing the figure to step through. The other Alice stumbled backward, fear flooding her pale features. The figure followed her. It stepped soundless, its shape expanding, filling every corner of the mirror world. Behind it, the spiral of pages began to close. The book was sealing itself, locking the story away again. Alice, the one inside the mirror, realized what it meant. Once the book shut, there would be no way back. The world she was trapped in would freeze forever. A story without an ending. A reader without escape. She looked at the figure of words, its inky face bending into a grin. Then she looked back through the mirror, at the faint outline of her old room, the soft bed, the quiet lamp, the space that once held warmth. Her chest ached. She whispered, "I remember what it felt like to be real." The figure stopped, its head tilted, as though those words meant something it had forgotten long ago. For a brief second, its letters flickered, a gap appeared in its chest, a hollow space, shaped like a keyhole. The rabbit's voice returned, faint but distinct. "The ink binds all who read, but truth can unwrite what fear creates." Alice stared at the book lying open beyond the mirror. Its last page glowed faintly red, her blood from earlier still there, marking her claim. She pressed her hand against the inside of the glass again. This time, instead of cold resistance, she felt heat. The mirror was soft, almost breathing. The inky figure turned toward her, reaching out a long, twisting hand. But she acted first. She pushed her palm hard against the glass. The warmth turned to fire. The mirror rippled, and she felt herself tearing through it, like breaking the surface of deep water. Light exploded. The sound of the clock shattered into nothing. Then silence. When Alice opened her eyes, she was lying on her bed. The book was closed beside her. Her reflection in the mirror was still. The air was calm. The shadows were normal again. For a moment, she thought it was over. She sat up slowly, breathing hard, trying to convince herself she was back in her world. But when she turned the book over, she saw something that froze her blood. The title was no longer Alice in Wonderland. It now read The Girl Who Read Too Deeply, and beneath it, written in small golden letters, by Alice. Her reflection smiled again. This time, it did not match her face. Its lips moved before hers did, and in that silent movement, she could read what it said. Once a story opens, it never truly ends. The lamp flickered once. The clock began to tick backward, and the book, very quietly, began to open again. The clock ticked backward. Each soft click echoed deeper than sound, as though time itself was being peeled away. Alice froze. Her breath caught halfway between fear and disbelief. The pages of the book turned on their own, slowly, deliberately, until they reached the very first page. But the first page was no longer white. It shimmered faintly, as if covered by a thin layer of moving water. She leaned closer. Her reflection rippled across the paper. For one fragile moment, she thought she saw herself smiling. Not the broken, fearful smile she wore now, but a peaceful one, the kind she had before she opened the book. Then the page blinked. The ink began to spread. Lines of writing formed one after another. Fresh, alive, still wet. She could smell the metallic scent of it. The words told a story. It was her story. Every moment she had lived since opening Alice in Wonderland. But it did not end where she thought it had. It went further. It showed her what was coming. Her hands began to shake. She tried to close the book, but her fingers refused to move. The air around her grew heavy again. The room dimmed, its corners swallowed by something thick and dark. The reflection in the mirror smiled wider, watching her like a spectator at a show. Its eyes glimmered, no longer black, but gold like molten metal. When it spoke, its voice came from inside her chest. You are reading the story of your own undoing. Alice's throat went dry. She whispered, I will not let you control me. The reflection tilted its head. Control is illusion, it said. The moment you opened the book, you invited the words in. They live under your skin now. Alice's gaze dropped to her hands. Faint lines of ink had begun to appear beneath her skin, like veins made of letters. They moved, slowly crawling upward toward her wrists. She tried to wipe them away, but the more she rubbed, the clearer the words became. The letters formed phrases, her thoughts, her fears, her secrets. Everything she had never spoken aloud was written there. Her reflection laughed softly. You see, it said, you are a page. You were always meant to be written. The lamp flickered again, casting long shadows across the walls. Those shadows began to stretch, their shapes bending and twisting until they resembled words, sentences forming in black across the plaster. They crawled upward like vines, wrapping around the ceiling, spelling her name again and again. Alice! 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 Her breath quickened. The room pulsed with a heartbeat that was not her own. The book on her lap began to tremble, its spine cracking open wider. Pages fluttered violently, throwing bursts of light that stung her eyes. The reflection stepped closer in the mirror. Her golden eyes burned brighter. Let go, she whispered. Let the story finish you. Alice shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I will write my own ending, she said. Her voice trembled, but her was sharpened. The reflection frowned, the first flicker of uncertainty crossing her perfect face. No one writes their own ending, it said. Not here. Alice stood, her legs unsteady. The ink under her skin spread faster, climbing her arms, spreading across her neck. Her heartbeat thundered, but deep inside her, a spark of defiance ignited. She turned to the small desk by the window and grabbed the only thing that felt real, a pen. Its silver tip caught the light of the flickering lamp. She opened the book again. The pages trembled under her touch, but she forced herself to hold it steady. She began to write. At first, the ink resisted, the letters twisting and fading as soon as she formed them. The book was alive, fighting against her will. But she pressed harder, scratching the pen across the page, writing the words she needed to exist. I am not a story, she wrote. I am the author. The air shuddered. The lamp burst with a sharp pop, plunging the room into shadow. Only the glow from the mirror remained, casting long streaks of gold across the floor. Her reflection screamed, a raw, tearing sound that vibrated through her bones. Cracks spidered across the mirror surface. The glass pulsed like a living wound. Alice kept writing. Her hand moved faster. even as pain burned through her arm. The words flowed from her like blood, each sentence a defiance, each phrase a declaration of existence. "I am not yours," she wrote. "I am not a page. I am the ending." The mirror shattered. This time, the pieces did not fall. They hung suspended in the air, each shard showing a different reflection of her. 1,000 Alices, each trapped in a slightly different moment. Some were crying, some were laughing, some were still reading. The golden-eyed reflection was gone. The book glowed brighter now. The ink she had written burned like fire. She felt it traveling up her arm, into her chest, into her heart. It hurt, but it also felt right, like reclaiming what was stolen. Then silence. Absolute silence. The ink under her skin faded. The pages of the book stilled. The air grew calm once more. Alice sank to her knees, exhausted, trembling. The shattered pieces of the mirror floated gently to the ground, resting without a sound. She looked down at the book. Its title had changed again. Now it reads simply, "Alice the author." Her lips trembled into a weak smile. She whispered, "It is over." But the clock, still ticking backward, did not agree. Its hands continued to move in reverse. Faster now, undoing time itself. The walls around her began to fade. Her room melted away, the colors dissolving like paint in water. The book pulsed in her hands, beating like a heart, and then she realized it was not undoing time. It was undoing her world. The edges of the bed disappeared. The lamp dissolved into light. Even her voice began to thin, each breath lighter than the last. The only thing that remained solid was the book. Its pages fluttered once more, but now they whispered in her own voice. Soft, steady, determined. She leaned closer to hear it. The words were faint but clear. "You wrote the ending. Now you must live inside it." The ground gave way beneath her. She fell once again, through words, through sentences, through 1,000 unwritten dreams. When she opened her eyes, she stood in a vast white space. Pages drifted like snow. Quills floated in the air, drawing stories without hands. Everywhere she looked, books opened and closed by themselves. She reached out and touched one. Her own name was on the cover. But when she flipped it open, the story was blank, waiting, somewhere above her. The ticking began again, forward this time, slow, measured, and a single line appeared on the page in front of her, written in her own handwriting. Once upon a time, Alice stopped being afraid. She smiled softly. Then she picked up the pen floating beside her and began to write again. The quill in Alice's hand moved on its own at first, trembling slightly as if uncertain of what to say. The first drop of ink spread like a heartbeat, pulsing in the quiet, white world around her. Then, as she steadied her breath, the tip of the pen obeyed. She wrote slowly, each word carving itself into the glowing paper. "I remember light. I remember pain. But I am still here." The words rippled outward. The empty pages surrounding her began to move, fluttering like startled birds. Lines of ink appeared on them, sentences she had never written, yet somehow knew by heart. They were the stories she had lived, the ones she had feared, the ones she had tried to forget. Each book became a fragment of her soul. Some glowed with warmth, memories of laughter, her mother's voice, the smell of rain on her childhood window. Others bled darkness, dripping black ink that hissed when it touched the white ground. Those were the nights she had cried, the choices she regretted, the guilt she never voiced. Alice took a step forward. The ground beneath her rippled like soft water, but it held her weight. A soft whisper filled the air, the pages speaking, thousands of voices murmuring at once. It sounded like wind through leaves. Then, a shape began to form ahead. It was tall and curved, an archway made entirely of open books, their pages forming the frame, their spines creating the path beneath her feet. The archway pulsed faintly with gold light. Alice hesitated. Beyond the archway was only shadow, but the pen in her hand grew warm, urging her forward. She took a breath and stepped through. The world on the other side was not white anymore. It was night, deep, starless, endless. But under her feet stretched a path of floating pages, leading across the dark like stepping stones. Each time she set her foot down, a faint glow followed her step, illuminating a few more inches of the way ahead. In the distance, she could see something. A faint light, small but constant. It flickered like a candle in the wind. As she walked, the whispers followed her. Some pleaded, some laughed softly, some called her name in broken tones. She realized with a chill that these were all her unfinished stories, the ones she had abandoned, the tales she began but never dared to finish. Each one wanted to be completed. Each one wanted an ending. The pen pulsed again. A voice echoed through the darkness, soft and haunting, the same voice that had once belonged to her reflection. Every story you left behind waits for you here. Alice froze. Her fingers tightened around the pen. I am not yours anymore, she said quietly. The voice chuckled, low and distant. Not mine, it said, but not entirely your own either. You think freedom comes without cost. A chill crept through her spine. The floating pages beneath her began to quiver. The darkness thickened, curling around her ankles like smoke. I will pay the cost, she whispered, but I will not go back. The pen flared in her hand, a burst of silver light that burned away the smoke. The darkness recoiled with a hiss, and the voice fell silent. When the air cleared, the faint candlelight ahead had grown stronger. Alice kept walking. Her steps were slower now, but her heart beat with steady rhythm. As she approached the light, she saw that it was not a candle at all. It was a desk, the same wooden desk from her bedroom. Her lamp, her notebook, even her half-empty cup of tea sat there, as if nothing had changed. But the room around it was gone. Only the desk existed, floating in the middle of the dark. Alice reached out and touched it. It was solid, warm, real. She sat down. For a long moment, she just stared at the notebook. The cover was blank. No title, no name, just a clean, waiting surface. Then she noticed something new. Carved faintly into the wood of the desk were 5 words. Write what you cannot escape. Her chest tightened. She looked at the blank page again. There was so much she wanted to say. So many truths she had buried under layers of fear. But as she opened her mouth, the silence pressed against her lips like a weight. She forced her trembling hand to move. The first word appeared, then another, and another. This time, she did not write about fantasy, or reflections, or haunted books. She wrote about herself, the girl who was too afraid to live, the woman who tried to disappear behind other people's stories. Her pen flowed like a vein opened. Each sentence carved away a part of her sorrow. Each paragraph built a bridge back to the world she had lost. When she finished the final line, the notebook closed itself softly. A breath of wind, warm and fragrant, swept through the air. The darkness cracked open like a shell, splintering into rays of light. The pages beneath her feet disintegrated into silver dust. The world turned bright, so bright she had to cover her eyes. And then, silence again. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her room. The lamp glowed softly. The mirror hung on the wall, whole again, smooth and quiet. The book lay on her lap, its title once more plain, Alice in Wonderland. But when she turned the pages, the ending was different. It ended with a single sentence written in her own hand. Alice left the story and became real. Tears welled in her eyes. This time, they were not from fear. She reached out and touched the mirror, and her reflection smiled back, exactly like her. No gold eyes, no cruel grin, just her. A soft knock came from the hallway. Her mother's voice called, "Alice, are you awake?" She exhaled a shaky laugh. "Yes," she said softly, "I am." And for the first time in a long time, the word felt true. Outside her window, the sun began to rise, casting long ribbons of gold across her floor. The light caught the cover of the book, and for a heartbeat, the letters shimmered again, not with warning, but with peace. Alice placed it gently on her shelf. Then she opened a new notebook, a blank one, her own. She lifted her pen and began to write, not because she had to, but because she could. The first line flowed effortlessly. Once upon a time, I stopped running from my own story. And somewhere, in the hidden corners of all stories, 1,000 unwritten endings bowed their heads in quiet respect. For the first time in forever, Alice was not a character. She was a creator, and her story, truly hers, had only just begun. Days passed like gentle waves, soft and unhurried. The once haunted silence of Alice's room had turned into a sanctuary of calm. She would wake early, open her curtains wide, and let the golden light pour in like honey through glass. Her notebooks began to multiply. Some were filled with half-finished thoughts, others with dreams written down before they slipped away. Every page carried traces of her, the curve of her letters, the rhythm of her breath between words, the quiet tremor of a heart relearning how to feel. Yet beneath the peace, there lingered a faint hum, a sound she could not name, a feeling she could not bury. Sometimes, in the hush between twilight and sleep, she thought she heard the faint rustle of pages turning on their own. Sometimes, when her eyes drifted toward the shelf, she noticed Alice in Wonderland leaning slightly forward, as if straining to listen. But she told herself it was imagination, a ghost of memory, not a threat, until the night the wind changed. It came softly at first, a sigh through the window cracks, cool and sharp. Then it grew into a whispering draft that slid beneath her door. Her papers fluttered. Her pen rolled off the desk and stopped at her bare foot. She bent to pick it up, and that was when she saw it. A single page lay on the floor. It was not from her notebook. The paper was yellowed, edges curled and faintly damp. In the center, scrawled in dark ink, were 4 words. "The story is awake." Alice froze. Her throat tightened, her heartbeat loud enough to fill the room. She turned toward the bookshelf. The copy of Alice in Wonderland was missing. The space where it should have been gaped empty, as if the book had been pulled out moments ago. She rose slowly, her breath shallow, eyes scanning the dim corners of her room. Every shadow seemed to move, every flicker of light seemed to pulse. Then came the ticking. Faint, steady, deliberate. It came not from a clock, but from the direction of her desk. Alice stepped closer. Her lamp flickered once, casting the faintest glow on the open notebook. The page had changed, in her own handwriting, but in words she did not write. It said, "You ended one tale, but not the world that made it." Her skin crawled. The air thickened, sweet and sour like rotting flowers. She tried to close the notebook, but the cover resisted, as if glued to the desk. The pen trembled beside it, lifting ever so slightly off the wood. Ink bled from its tip, dripping down and forming a small dark pool. Alice stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the chair. Her mind screamed to run, to flee the room, the house, the story. But her feet refused to move. The ink spread wider, its surface reflecting faint shapes, trees, clouds, a field under a violet sky. It was a window, a doorway, and within that ink, she saw herself, the other Alice, standing on the opposite side. The reflection tilted its head. Its smile was slow, patient, too human to be entirely wrong. "You wrote freedom," it said softly, voice muffled but clear. "But you left me here." Alice shook her head. "You are gone," she whispered. "I ended you." The reflection laughed, a hollow sound, like wind through broken glass. "Stories do not end," it said. "They only sleep, and when you dream of them again, they wake." The ink pulsed once more, rippling outward. Her reflection reached toward her, and this time, the surface of the ink trembled like real water. Alice stumbled back, her heels striking the wall. "No," she said firmly, "this is not real." But as she said it, she realized the room had changed. The walls were too tall, the shadows too long, the air too still. She turned, and found that her door was gone. In its place stood a bookshelf, stretching upward forever. Every spine was blank, every book hummed faintly, as if alive. A voice whispered behind her ear, "Welcome back, reader." She spun around. The white rabbit stood there, but smaller now, fragile, almost translucent. Its eyes were dull, its body trembling. Alice stepped back. "You should not exist," she said. The rabbit smiled weakly. "Neither should stories," it replied. "Yet here we are." It looked toward the ink portal. "She is waiting," it said, "and she will not wait forever." Alice's pulse hammered. "I will not go back." The rabbit tilted its head. "Then she will come here." The ink shimmered. The reflection moved closer, its hands pressing against the surface. Each touch left a dark print that spread like veins across the floor. Alice's instinct screamed. Not to fight, but to finish. She grabbed the pen. The moment her fingers wrapped around it, the air vibrated. The books trembled. The pages began to fall open around her. Each one showed a memory. Her tears. Her laughter. The moment she first read those cursed words. "End it properly," whispered the rabbit. "Or live it forever." Alice's breath came in gasps. Her hand shook as she brought the pen to the notebook. The reflection's voice echoed through the ink. "You can write me out, but you will write yourself away." Alice's mind split between fear and truth. Maybe that was the price. The cost of creation. The cost of freedom. She pressed the nib down. Ink spread across the page like wildfire. Each word she wrote tore through the air, erasing shadows, silencing whispers. She wrote with everything she had, every memory, every heartbeat, every fragment of pain. When she finished the last word, the room cracked open like glass. Light poured in, searing and pure. The rabbit dissolved into dust. The ink vanished. The reflection screamed, not in anger, but in something deeper. Loss, and then silence again. Alice opened her eyes. She was outside. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees. A cool breeze brushed her face. Her notebook lay open on her lap, its pages blank once more. Only one line remained, written in her own hand. A story ends only when the writer forgets. Alice looked up at the sky. It was clear, endless, alive. She smiled faintly, not out of relief, but understanding. She closed the notebook. She would not forget, but she would never read that story again. And somewhere deep in the unseen spaces between dreams, a single voice whispered softly, almost tenderly, "Until you do." The wind that swept across the meadow carried with it the scent of damp earth and wild jasmine. Alice sat beneath an old willow tree, the shade soft and trembling. Her fingers traced the cover of her notebook, though she dared not open it. It had been 3 days since she woke beneath that same tree, the morning after the story ended, or perhaps began again. The forest was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that did not belong to nature, but to something watching, something waiting. She had wandered far from her village. The road behind her was gone, swallowed by fog. When she looked back, she could see nothing but white, a wall of mist that shimmered faintly, as though it were breathing. Alice drew her knees close to her chest. She whispered softly to herself, as if saying the words could make them real. "This is the real world. The story is finished. I am home." But even as she spoke, the wind changed again. The leaves rustled with a rhythm that was not natural, a steady pattern, like words whispered in a language older than thought. The willow's branches bent low, as if bowing to something unseen. Alice stood quickly. Her pulse beat against her throat. She clutched her notebook like a talisman, its edges digging into her palms. From beyond the mist came the faintest sound. Not footsteps, not voices, but a turning. The gentle rustle of pages being flipped one by one. She froze. That sound had haunted her dreams for weeks. She had promised herself never to hear it again. Yet here it was, soft, patient, and terribly close. "Alice!" A voice called. It was quiet but clear, like a whisper under water. It came from the fog. She stepped back instinctively. "No," she said aloud. Her voice cracked. "You are gone." The mist swirled in answer. A shape began to emerge, a figure tall and indistinct, its form made of shifting ink and smoke. It was not her reflection this time. It was something older, something behind all mirrors. The figure's voice flowed like the sound of 1,000 quills scratching parchment. "Every world begins with a word, and every word needs a voice. You wrote the story to end me, but you forget, Alice. You gave me language. You gave me life." Alice backed away until her heel struck the tree trunk. She could not run. There was nowhere to go. The figure stepped closer, and with each movement, its outline sharpened. A human shape with eyes of liquid ink, hands that bled sentences as they moved. "What do you want?" she asked. It smiled faintly. "Nothing more than you promised. An ending." Alice shook her head. "I already gave you one." "No," the voice replied, its tone gentle, almost sorrowful. "You gave yourself peace, not truth. The story never wanted to be erased. It wanted to be understood. The figure extended its hand. Between its fingers floated a single piece of parchment. It glowed faintly, its words unreadable from where she stood. "Take it," it said. "Finish what you began." Alice hesitated. The last time she had taken something from that world, she had nearly lost herself. But something inside her, some deep, gnawing need, urged her to see. She reached out slowly. The moment her fingertips touched the page, the ink rippled like water. The air around her split apart, and the forest dissolved. She fell, not through darkness this time, but through memory. Scenes flashed before her eyes. Her childhood home, her mother's laughter, the first time she had ever opened Alice in Wonderland. She saw herself at 7 years old, reading by candlelight, whispering the words aloud because silence frightened her. Then she saw it, a flicker she had forgotten. On that night long ago, as she read the story, a drop of her candle wax had fallen on the page, melting a single letter. When she had tried to wipe it away, the ink had moved beneath her fingers, alive, curious, and something in the story had looked back at her. She gasped. The realization struck like thunder. She had not been pulled into the story. She had opened it. She had given it entry. Through her belief, through her voice, through the tiny ritual of reading aloud. When she landed, she was no longer in the meadow. She was standing in a library, vast, endless, walls spiraling upward beyond sight. Every shelf overflowed with books, their covers breathing faintly, their titles shifting like living things. The figure stood beside her. "This is the archive," it said softly. "Every story that has ever existed, and every story that will be." Alice turned slowly, her heart pounding. Rows upon rows stretched into infinity, their spines whispering as though they shared secrets. Some books glowed with warmth, others pulsed with darkness. But all of them, all, had one thing in common. Every title began with her name. Alice felt her knees weaken. "What is this?" The figure's ink-like eyes gleamed. "The cost of creation," it said. "Every tale you read, every dream you lived, every fear you imagined, they became echoes of you. You are not a reader, Alice. You are the doorway." She stumbled backward, shaking her head. "No, I did not make this." "You did not mean to," it replied. "But you believed, and belief, once spoken, becomes real." Alice's vision blurred. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of dust and ink. Her notebook burned faintly in her hands. It wanted to be opened. She looked at it, terrified, trembling, and slowly lifted the cover. The pages were blank, except for one sentence at the center. "The reader writes by reading." And as she stared at the words, she saw ink begin to bloom from beneath them, spreading outward in lines, curving, twisting, forming letters, forming her name. She dropped the book, but the ink continued to pour from it, spilling across the floor, pooling around her feet. The figure smiled faintly. "You are both writer and written," it said. "The story needs you, as you need it." Alice took a step back. "No," she whispered. "I will not be trapped again." The figure extended its hand once more, but this time it held a mirror. Inside its surface, she saw not her reflection, but infinite versions of herself, each holding a pen, each trapped within a page, each looking up at her with desperate eyes. The figure's voice softened. "Free them," it said, "or they will write without you." Alice stared into the mirror. Heartbreaking, mind-racing. Each version of her looked so real, so afraid, so alive. She could not bear to watch them suffer. She picked up her pen again. Its tip shimmered with light. She closed her eyes and began to write, not with fear this time, but with choice. Her words came slow, deliberate, powerful. With each line, the mirror cracked. The echoes of her smiled through the fractures. Then the light consumed everything. When it faded, Alice stood alone once more. The figure gone, the library silent. Her notebook lay open in her hands, filled with her own words, the first story that truly belonged to her. She smiled faintly. The air smelled like ink and morning rain. Somewhere deep within the infinite shelves, a whisper echoed, not of warning, but of wonder. The story is never the trap. It is the key. Alice's knees trembled as she stood before the mirror. The glass no longer reflected her face. It pulsed, faintly, like a heart beneath ice. Shadows curled within it, shaping into strange forms that whispered without sound. Her breath clouded the surface. The mist from her mouth swirled and revealed something. Another eye staring back at her, not her own. It blinked once, slow and deliberate. Alice stepped back. The sound of her shoes echoed far longer than they should have, as though the room had grown larger, deeper. The walls wavered, and for a moment she felt as though she stood in a tunnel made of glass and breath. A soft giggle slipped from behind the mirror. Not in front. Behind. It was light and mocking, the laugh of a child who knows something dreadful. Alice whispered, "Who is there?" The reflection tilted its head. Her own face smiled, though she had not. Its eyes were wide, hungry, gleaming with a madness that did not belong to her. The mirrored Alice pressed her palm against the glass. Alice felt a chill run up her arm, as though the cold fingers were not hers anymore. "Do you want to see?" The voice from beyond murmured. "What it feels like to fall again." The floor tilted. The sound of breaking porcelain filled her ears. She reached for something. The chair, the table, the edge of reason. But the world melted away. She fell. Not through air, but through thought, through memory, through the cracks of her own imagination. Books fluttered around her like dark birds. Each page whispered pieces of a story she had never written. Each word filled with dread and longing. The Cheshire Cat appeared in fragments. A grin first, then a whisper, then two eyes that glowed like lanterns in fog. "You read too deeply," it purred. "And now the words are reading you." The cat's smile faded as the darkness thickened. Alice landed on something soft, a field of white roses. Their petals were cool and damp beneath her hands. She looked closer. The roses were not white. They were bone. Each petal was thin, translucent, and inside each one pulsed a faint red glow. The air smelled of iron and candle wax. In the distance, a figure stood beside a crooked tea table. The Hatter, or something wearing his face. His eyes were mirrors, and within them she saw herself falling again and again. A loop without escape. He raised a teacup that steamed with silver mist. "Drink," he said. "It helps you forget the ending." Alice hesitated. The cup trembled in his hand. The mist coiled upward, forming words that hung in the air. "You are still dreaming." She stepped back. The table stretched like a ribbon of glass. The Hatter's smile widened until it split the air. From behind him, the white rabbit crawled out, its fur matted with ink, its clock shattered in bleeding time. Tick, tick, tick. Each second echoed louder, until it became thunder in her chest. The rabbit whispered, "You have been reading for too long, Alice. Stories do not end when you wake. They end when you forget." She covered her ears. The voices multiplied. The queen's shriek, the caterpillar's hiss, the childlike laughter from the mirror, all blending into one relentless sound. The sound of 1,000 pages turning at once. Alice ran. The forest closed around her. Trees leaned close, their branches whispering her name. The ground pulsed beneath her feet like a heartbeat. She tripped, fell face first into a puddle of ink. Her reflection smiled from beneath the surface, reaching up with blackened hands. Alice screamed. The ink filled her mouth, her lungs, her eyes. The world became paper and sound. And then, silence. She woke in her chair. The book lay open on her lap, pages calm and still. Morning light touched the room. Birds sang softly beyond the window. For a moment, everything seemed ordinary. But when she looked again, the words on the page had changed. They spelled her name, over and over, each line written in a looping, childish hand. She dropped the book. It landed with a whisper like breath. In the mirror across the room, her reflection smiled. A moment before she did, the teacup on her desk rattled. Somewhere far away, a clock struck 13, and from the depths of the mirror, a voice, barely more than a sigh, whispered, "Welcome back, Alice." The glass rippled once, and the reflection stepped forward. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were not. The world dimmed around her, colors draining into gray. The sound of fluttering pages filled the air again. As the story began to rewrite itself, Alice reached for the book, but her hands passed through it like smoke. She turned toward the mirror, drawn by the quiet hum of her own voice calling. The reflection extended a hand. Her touch felt real, too real. And then, as her fingers brushed the cold surface, the world inverted. The room became ink. The light became shadow. And Alice became part of a story. Her last thought before the silence swallowed her was not a fear, but a familiarity, because she finally understood. The tale had never been written about her. It had been written by her. And now, it was time to read forever. The end.